You're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
I can't go back.
Welcome to the She Became Visible podcast. I'm your host, Renee Steelman. This podcast is my story. It's your story. It's our story. It's all the stories of all the women who one day knew that it was time to remember who they were, who they are, and stand up and be seen. Welcome to She Became Visible. It is December 19th, 2024, and this is my, I wouldn't say finale, but for She Became Visible exclusively, this is my final episode on She Became Visible that I'm going to be primarily talking about the Mormon Church. I feel as though it is a never-ending story. And if I don't conclude at some point, it will never stop. So although Mormonism is a big part of my life, I have been or was a member of the church for over 50-something years. I joined the church with my family when I was 12. It was back in 1962. And so it was a big part of my life, and it had a big impact on my life. So it's not easy to leave such a fundamental part of your life. But I just know that I have to. I have such a love for so many other things in this world that I cannot continue. But the reason that I was unable to let it go in 2024 is because it literally is never ending, especially with the age of information, the news that is out there about the system of Mormonism. It's hard to overlook. It's a constant slapping the forehead going, what? Again? And so it really was difficult for me to just let it go. But in 2025, I really want to emphasize becoming visible as a woman over the age of 60. Now, I'd like to say over the age of 50, and I will include women of that age group, but I'm really going to be talking about aging, living your authentic life as an older woman, finding out who you are as an older woman, and taking your ground, taking back your space. And that's what I really want to emphasize. And of course, part of that has to do with leaving a fundamental religion or any system that tells you who you are or directs your life for you. So whether it is religion or even just your cultural upbringing, I'm really hoping that She Became Visible will become a tool for women to use to find out who they really are and what gives them the most happiness. So that is my goal for 2025. Two things. My very first guest in 2025 is going to be a fabulous naturopath who will answer all of your questions about hormone, weight loss, longevity, all kinds of things that affect people, and not in a, hey, let me give you a prescription way. This fabulous doctor is going to talk to us as women about how we can be our best selves through homeopathic and natural medicine, and really taking responsibility for our own health and wellness. And so she is going to be my very first guest. So this is really going to set the year off right. The other thing, number two, is I'm going to be working with a fabulous company that's going to be producing my podcast and making it once again available in a podcast form and not just on YouTube, which has been, it's just been a pain in the neck for me to do. So I've just been relying on YouTube, but we're going to get it back into a podcast form. So those of you that don't have YouTube or don't want to watch it, or don't want to download the app, will be able to find it on just a podcast medium. So that's the other thing that we're going to be doing in 2025. So I'm really excited about that. But what I want to kind of end 2024 on is an example of why it was so difficult for me to drop the subject. You know, there's a saying in the Mormon Church where when people leave the religion, there's a saying that people that are still true believers say, and it's like, you can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone. And this is meant as a derogatory statement. But it's true. But the reason is because the Mormon Church keeps making really fatal mistakes. Really, I'm blown away at the mistakes that the church is making in the last 5 or 6 years, as if they did not have educated marketing, PR staff, statistics, focus groups. They have all that. And they own media corporations. They own television stations and radio stations. They have people, and yet they keep making these mistakes. And so it's just, like I said, it's just forehead slapping. You just kind of keep going, what? And so it just pulls you back in. And so I want to end this because I've realized it's never going to stop. It's never going to stop with this religion. And so I can't continue. I have to move on. There are more important things like my biceps. That's way more important, especially at my age, right? Anyway, so let's get started. I'm going to start out by talking about, as I mentioned, the LDS Church is very prolific as far as their media. I mean, they have got a set of what they call tools on the LDS app that you can download that is just full of information. And there's obviously a concern for the children of the church and making sure that there's some kind of indoctrination, but also inoculation for the teachings that the church has been giving since, 1830. So they're having to backpedal a lot of the teachings, and they're needing to explain them and justify them, which is really hard to do unless you are completely obediently obeying and following rules and not using your critical thinking skills whatsoever. So one of the biggest controversies in the Mormon Church is polygamy. Honestly, polygamy is what has taken the church down in the beginning with Joseph Smith, continued to take the church down when they went to Utah. And then there was kind of a laying low phase in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, where the church, through their PR program, was able to kind of put polygamy aside and really just convert people on the truthfulness of a gospel that was restored and the fabulous things that the church is doing. And it really became just a look what great things this community is doing. Just don't look behind the curtain. That was in the past. In fact, my favorite prophet, President Gordon B. Hinckley, those were, a paraphrased version of what he said is, let's not look into the past. Let's move forward. It doesn't matter what we did in the past, but what matters is what we're doing now. That was his true belief. And I don't think he meant that in a malicious way at all. It truly was his mindset. And he was very adamant about finding happiness. And why dwell in the past? Let's just move forward. And that was his way of finding happiness. And so that worked for a long time. But the problem is the things that the church was teaching is now bleeding into other areas. And sexual abuse is one of the areas that is becoming a sticking point for the church, because there is this mindset of patriarchal order, priesthood power, what the woman's role is in a marriage, and what a man's role is in a marriage, and what the role of women truly is and what it means. And so there's a lot of underlying teachings that are coming to the forefront, and it's being really kind of opened up to the reality of what those teachings mean. So the biggest brouhaha right now is the church came out with a new program for children. And I would really admonish those of you who are not familiar with propaganda to go back and watch a few World War II YouTubes, some historical channel, and really bring yourself up to date on how propaganda was used in the Nazi regime, and how it was used to convince the beautiful German people that what was happening was good and okay. Propaganda is a strong tool, and the church is using it. And again, I can't get into their minds. I honestly don't know if it's a malicious movement, if they're really aware of what's happening, but rather than just being honest and coming forward, they're using this, what they're calling indoctrination, hoping that it will stop the bleeding and the of members of the church leaving the church. So they're really like, we can't work with you baby boomers anymore. We know that you're a lost cause, but we can still get the kids. It's like the little Nazi youth. So I want to show you a podcast, or no, rather a YouTube that was done recently by one of my favorite people in the world, Dr. Benjamin Park. And he is an author, an American historian. And of course, the Mormon Church is a big part of American history. And Benjamin addresses this new thing that was released on the LDS.org website for parents to use for their children. Now, by the way, I also have to talk about my outfit of the day. Obviously, as I mentioned, it's the 19th of December. We are working on the holidays here, and this is my version of a holiday outfit. So that explains why I have on antlers. So anyway, but let me bring forth Dr. Benjamin Park as he addresses this new cartoon that has been released on LDS.org.
Sanctioning the practices found in their scriptural canon. My name is Dr. Benjamin E. Park. I'm a scholar of American religion and author of the book American Zion, A New History of Mormonism. And I know I've taken a long break from this app, but I thought I would come and do a short video about this new lesson that appears in the LDS church curriculum for children, talking about plural marriage. There's been a lot of talk about how it's deceitful, it downplays or simplifies some complicated natures, but my hot take is the problem is not the instruction, the problem is the core teaching. Now, I'll get to what I mean with specifics later on, but let me just say I've touched on this topic before in an article I wrote for Religion Dispatches titled How an 1843 Revelation on Polygamy Poses a Serious Challenge to Modern Mormonism, and I've also done several videos on this channel about D&C 132, that polygamy revelation, and its long-lasting legacy.
Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I'm going to bring Dr. Park back. But what he's going to be addressing in this TikTok video that he made is why the church cannot separate itself from the laws of polygamy like they were able to do with the temple ban that was put into place in 1852. That ban was released and taken away from the church's beliefs and doctrine in 1978. So what he's saying is, why can't the laws of polygamy, or what some people like to refer to as the laws of eternal marriage, why can't that go away like the priesthood temple ban went away? So he's going on to explain it. But so I'm going to put Dr. Parks to bed for a little bit and show you a little bit about, wait. I might let him talk a little bit more. Okay, let's see. I want to go back and, okay, so I'm going to let Dr. Parks explain a little bit more about why he thinks the law of polygamy cannot just go away like the temple ban did for the church.
Let's dig into some of the context and the meanings. Now, I've written an entire book on the introduction of polygamy in Nauvoo, including its secretive implementation and practice by Joseph Smith, including his hiding of many of the details from his wife, Emma Smith. And one of the climactic moments of that story is in July of 1843, when he dictates a revelation for his brother Hiram to take to Emma, justifying the practice. Now, that document was written and dictated with the desired audience of one, but that revelatory text is going to have a long afterlife with many consequences. Now, I've done a video on the textual history of what comes to be known as Doctrine and Covenants 132, but suffice to say that in 1852, nearly a decade after the text's dictation, Brigham Young, now president of the church, publicly announces polygamy, telling the world that we are indeed practicing it, and one way to justify the practice is he cites that revelatory text, which he now had in his possession, and they published it in newspapers, and several decades later, in the 1870s, and this is the key part of the story, they published the revelation as part of their scriptural canon.
Okay, so that's the point that he's making, is they took this revelation that Brigham Young claimed in 1852, and they actually put it in scripture, and they canonized it as scripture. So this scripture can be found in the Mormon scriptures, the Doctrine and Covenants, section 132. So, but let me go back and show you what this new cartoon is that is bringing about so much controversy. So let me put Dr. Parks away here for a second, and let me bring on this new cartoon that you can find on LDS.org. And this is the church's way of how you can explain polygamy to your children. This is their idea of a simple way to inoculate your children against people who are making polygamy out to not be a revelation from God, but just to be the wantings of men. So let's go to this. So let me make this bigger. Okay, so it starts out by saying, while the prophet Joseph Smith was studying the Bible, he read about prophets like Abraham and Moses, who had been married to more than one wife. Joseph wondered how the Lord felt about that, so he decided to ask the Lord. The Lord said that usually a man should have only one wife, but sometimes the Lord commanded his people to be in marriages of one man and more than one woman. This was called plural marriage. The Lord told Joseph that his people should only be in plural marriages if he commands it. A few years later, the Lord told Joseph to marry another woman. Joseph didn't want to marry other wives, but he knew it was a commandment from the Lord. When Joseph asked a woman to marry him, he told her to pray about it. He wanted her to know from the Lord that it was right. This commandment was also hard for Joseph's first wife, Emma. Sometimes Emma helped Joseph decide who he should ask to marry him. Other times, Emma did not want Joseph to marry other women. Joseph taught the 12 apostles about plural marriage. It was a hard commandment for them too. Brigham Young and his wife, Marianne, prayed a lot to the Lord about what to do. They learned that they should obey the commandments of plural marriage. For many years, some of the saints were asked to be in plural marriages. People outside the church did not like plural marriage. They made laws against it. There were already laws in place, by the way. And some saints, including church leaders, were put in prison. But the Lord blessed the families who obeyed this commandment. And even when it was hard, in 1890, the Lord told Wilfred Woodruff, the president of the church, that men should not marry more than one wife anymore. The leaders of the church shared this commandment with the saints. This is still the Lord's commandment today. A man should be married to go away. Okay, anyway. Okay, first of all, that's a lie right there, because in 1890, when Wilfred Woodruff made that statement, they secretly were still continuing to do polygamy until like 1920. So they went behind the backs of the law. That's why the Mormons moved to Mexico and Canada. It's because they were looking for a place that they could safely practice polygamy, even though they were trying to put on a facade that they had eliminated this practice from their teachings and their beliefs. They were lying, and they were committing fraud against the U.S. government, and it was illegal. It was illegal when Joseph did it in 1830. And by the way, the whole story about Emma helping Joseph pick his wives, it's all just garbage. It's just garbage. It is truly propaganda. And so that is where all of this thing started. But this is what families are going to be gathering their children together at their knee and teaching them. And this is a huge problem. And I loved this. Natasha Helfer is a sex therapist. And the way that she phrased her discontent with this new teaching, I thought was beautiful. And I'm going to bring her on right now to talk about this.
Sexual assault, which includes,
let me go back. Okay,
is that Mormon polygamy was a form of sexual assault, given our current definitions of how we define sexual assault, which includes forced coercion. A lot of times people think, oh, sexual assault is just a physical manifestation when somebody touches your body incorrectly. No, sexual assault can be exhibitionism that is unwanted. Sexual assault can definitely include forced coercion, where people don't know, they cannot give consent because consent is coerced. And some people might confuse this with unwanted sexual consent. I do think that there are times when people will have sex for a variety of reasons, and maybe it's not because they want pleasure out of it. But when you're entering the concept of coercion, we are now past that as well. We are now in the realm of sexual assault.
Okay, so let me go back. So what Natasha is pointing out, and what history reveals, is what the church is saying in these children's cartoons is they're trying to lay out the fact that Joseph Smith did not want to practice polygamy. Emma wasn't happy about it. Brigham Young wasn't happy about it, but they prayed and God told them this is what they should do. Now, I would suggest that you go back and do some history and look up a few YouTubes on David Koresh, because this was also a teaching from God, according to David Koresh. You should look up other cult leaders. You should look up the Jim Jones and talk about how he also told the people that what he was doing was directed by God. Using God as your authority to prevent, to commit crimes and things that are unlawful is the story. It's the practice. It's the MO, right? And so what they don't go into in those cartoons for children is the women that Joseph Smith approached who said, absolutely not. I have no desire to marry you. Thank you. No. And then their reputations were ruined, or they were coerced by their family because Joseph Smith told them, if you give me your daughter, if you will allow me to marry your 14-year-old daughter, I will make sure that your entire family has a place in heaven. And so because they believed this man to be a prophet, they basically sold their daughter to the wolf. And so this is not a simple cartoon. This is a very complicated, very nefarious, this is nefarious, thing that was done by men who were exhibiting sexual control over young women. And here's the other thing. When they put that cartoon up and they said that even though it was very hard, many families were blessed. That's not true. That's not true. Many women and children suffered from lack of care and subsistence because there were so many wives with not enough money and not enough food to go around. And it's historical. You can find documents of women that were hungry, children that just ran the streets with no control because there was no father in the home, and the mothers were trying to do the best that they could, but it just wasn't a great thing. And so this whole idea that polygamy was fabulous and everybody was happy is just a lie. And so what Dr. Parks goes on to say, and let me fast forward and bring him back up here.
Doctrine and Covenants. Now, importantly, when Wilford Woodruff publicly renounces polygamy in 1890, he does not renounce the revelatory authority of the practice up until that point. He just said that God now commands that we're not going to practice from here on out. Though, spoiler, they do practice for another couple decades, but that's a story for another video. So even after the public disavowal of polygamy in 1890, and even after the church stops to formally sanction and informally sanction the practice a couple decades later, polygamy continues to haunt the church because Doctrine and Covenants 132 is found in those scriptures. So it remains a live possibility. It is one reason why Mormon fundamentalists thrive throughout the 20th century, because they are able to point to that text and say, we are fulfilling one of Mormonism's core doctrines.
Okay, so I love that he points this out. He's saying that, the Mormon Church renounces the fundamental religions, and the other religions that call themselves the Mormons, reorganized Mormon Church and all of these other sects that broke off, because they say, look, we don't practice polygamy anymore, and that's wrong that they do that. But the fundamental churches will point out and say, it's still in your scriptures. We are the true believers because we're practicing what Joseph Smith revealed from God, and you're not. And that's what he points out. And so when I see these men being arrested, like, Warren Jeffs, the church has nothing to stand on by saying, oh, yeah, that's really bad. That's really horrible, because our way into the 20th century, our prophets were marrying 15-year-old girls and practicing polygamy. So it's just so hypocritical. But basically what Dr. Parks is going to say is the reason the church cannot break away from polygamy is because it is in the scriptural canon. Unlike the priesthood and temple ban, that was just a policy. It was never made into a scripture. And so this is where he says the church has got a problem. They're going to have to figure this out. So that's go back and find Dr. Benjamin Parks on TikTok. He is fabulous. His book, American Zion, I love Kingdom of Nauvoo, fabulous book. Anyway, so that's what what I want to talk about next is my beautiful friend Maven brought to the attention a controversy that's going on in Denmark right now. And the controversy revolves around a man who was drugging and raping his wife for a number of years. And when the wife went to her clergy, her bishop, her stake president, as they are known in the Mormon Church, they basically told her, too bad, so sad, babe. You're a wife. You're a woman. Men have needs. We'll talk to him, but maybe this is something you need to work on. And so this is another form of SA that is being not handled correctly by the church. And so this is the YouTube that was broadcast, I believe, yesterday. And I just wanted to highlight this for you and encourage you to find this on Mormon Stories. Look up Mormon Stories, Denmark, and watch the full 2 hours, because the men who have brought this story to life are beautiful. And I applaud them so much for what they're doing. So let me bring that on stage, just give you a little taste of how this.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories Podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's December 12th, 2024. And today we have kind of a shocking and disturbing story for you, although it's another in a very long line of stories we have brought to you on Mormon Stories Podcast about sexual abuse and sexual cover-ups within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or within the Mormon Church. One of the headlines we chose for today is Denmark reacts to local Mormon abuse cover-ups. Another title we have is Faith, Hope, and Rape, which is, I believe, the name of a documentary series done in Denmark, covering a case where, again, we have a member of the Mormon Church raped and or abused, and the Mormon Church, apparently, from what I understand so far, doing its best to protect the perpetrators at the expense of the victims and or to cover up. But that's just my brief understanding of what's going on. I'm going to be learning about this.
Okay, I'm going to fast forward this a little bit, but that's a little bit of a explanation of what this Mormon Stories was about. And I think the most important thing in this is the fact that this journalist and a member of the church were very willing to talk about it and bring it to light, and the strength of the wife and what she was able to do in spite of getting absolutely zero support from her so-called priesthood leaders. Let me fast forward this to, okay, let me bring on my beautiful friend Maven.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and pull up the slides if that's.
Yeah, let's jump in.
We'll start there. Okay. So Faith, Hope, and Rape, that is the name of the documentary. I'll come over here. And again, just like John had mentioned, the trigger warning here. These are the things that I noticed, just like a real quick overview. Is that this is another story, yet again, where the church knows about ongoing sexual assault, where the abuser is given very minor punishment. They fail to report it to proper authorities. And of course, they do not protect and support the victim, not just from additional years of abuse, but once it was over, and really support. And then this is yet another case where it does become public, as much as the church likes to keep these things in-house. And when it does become public, the church does a lot of backpedaling to try to preserve its reputation. So these are some of the headlines here. So these are translated over into English from Danish.
Okay, just to take a moment for those of you that may be listening to this and not watching it. So this is a slide that Maven put up. Danish rape case shocks experts. Man sentenced to only 1 year of silence in the Mormon Church. Karen Vesterholm was drugged and raped several times by her husband. When the leadership of the Mormon Church became aware of the abuse, they did not go to the police. So this seems to be standard practice in the Mormon Church. They feel as though they can handle it in-house, that they can handle it through prayer, repentance, promises, other things that don't exist in the real world. And they refuse to report it to any kind of authority. Very similar to what happened in Bixby, Arizona. And the church, of course, says one thing to the public, and then says something else to the members of the church. So that's basically what this is all about. So let me go on.
So Danish rape case shocks experts. And in the subtitle here, it says, man sentenced to only 1 year of silence in the Mormon Church. I think that's a translation for disfellowshipment. So
let me move this forward a little bit here. Okay, so let me go on.
And this is also where our guests can really fill in not just the impact of the documentary itself, but the effect that it's having across the country, and the implications for their own laws, and really how they want to protect.
So what Maven is talking about is another article entitled "Minister of Religion Initiates Supervisory Investigation of the Mormon Church." Minister of Religion Morton Dahlen orders a supervisory investigation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Denmark, with the potential outcome of the church losing its status as a registered and acknowledged faith. That would be beautiful. Okay, let me move
victims
again. Okay, so the two men that are guests on the show
guests here. So the first person I reached out to is a former bishop. But as we know in Mormonism, once a bishop, always a bishop. So this is Lessa Mileso, and he can correct my pronunciation there. I reached out to Bishop Mileso. He was someone who appeared on the documentary, and he kind of, I think, is a good liaison for the insider church information that church members are often not willing to give. We tend to want to make the church look the best, and often it's people.
So this man is absolutely beautiful. And then the other one is the journalist, Michael Tucci. And he is not a member of the church, but is very knowledgeable and was absolutely astounded at some of the reactions that he gave. So I'm going to fast forward this. Let me see if I can make sure where this is.
Personally had several women and also males write to me and say thank you for putting the light on this and thanking Kieran for being the first one to open the door so that others can feel more safe also sharing their stories. And so it's really her that's the hero of this, and I think Michael should tell the story about her and how it all evolved.
I would actually like to add that she is probably one of the bravest people that I have met in my entire career, because you have to understand how much courage it actually takes to come forward and tell something so intimately as this story that and what she's been through. And imagine that when we start, my colleagues and me, when we start to call out to the people involved and they get to know that we're actually looking into this and we are doing a documentary on this, she starts to feel the pressure, obviously, from people around her and all the muscles in the church that does not want her to tell her story. So she has been through a lot, and that's actually also the reason why that she kind of said, now I have told my story, so now I'm going to sit back and hopefully let the documentary work. And I fully understand that.
Wow. Amazing. So I'm not going to show you the whole thing. I really encourage you to go to Mormon Stories Denmark and watch the whole thing for 2 hours. But I just want to applaud Maven for bringing this to light. And in the case of what happened in Bixby, Arizona, the church went on to continue to fight. And rather than acknowledging that they made a mistake, they fought the courts to not support the victims of this horrible abuse that was going on. And I just love what's happening in some of the European countries where they don't have that American judicial system where they're able to call the church out, and maybe they're doing the same thing financially, and now they're doing it with coercion and SA cases where they're able to call the church out because they don't have the lobbyists and the power in judicial systems that are members of the church that we do here in America. And so that was one of the things that, and this is, I don't know if you're able to watch this documentary in America. I've reached out to Maven to ask her where we could possibly watch it, but they're doing the same thing with which I covered on my podcast a couple of weeks ago with financial, Australia, New Zealand. They're calling the church out and saying, you can't do that in this country. You can't call yourself a charitable organization and do what you're doing. So it's very, very interesting. But what the bishop that Maven introduced you to, what he says at the end is, I'm asking the church to do better. I'm asking the church to go through the same process that every other Christian is asked to do, which is to acknowledge the mistake that you made, to ask for forgiveness, to repent and do better. And that's what he's asking the church to do. And one of the things that Michael points out as a journalist is some of the reactions that he gets from members of the church are, oh, this is just more persecution. You're just trying to point out all the little bad things and you don't point out the good things that we do. Or B, that's not true. That didn't happen. Or C, they'll say, well, bad things happen in every church. And I'm here to say that bad things do happen, and there are bad people in every system on the earth. However, I have seen the Catholic Church admit that they were wrong. I have heard the Catholic Church say, we need to do better. that moving priests around to different parishes, even though we knew they were child abusers, was wrong. We're sorry that we did that. We need to do better. You have never heard a member of the Mormon Church say that, and that's the difference. So I thought this was very astonishing. So let me also go down. So the other thing that I wanted to close out this podcast was part of the problem that the Mormon Church has with this patriarchy is this idea that these men, the top 15, you've got the first presidency, and then you've got 12 so-called apostles, and the power that members of the church give them. Now, there is a man who is a member of the 12 apostles. He is in line to be a prophet someday if these old guys will stop living so long. He's one of the younger apostles, but he is in his 60s. And the chances of him being a prophet are, who knows, because these guys seem to be living on forever. And the prophet is, the position of prophet is done by age, and they hold that position until they die. The current prophet is 100 years old. The next guy in line is in his 90s. So you can see that this is a long road. Anyway, this guy has an ego bigger than a lot of narcissists that are out there. And so this young lady made a TikTok, and this is the second time this behavior has been reported. She's talking about David Bednar, who is a narcissist to the hilt. He is mean. He has a sullen face, and his face is always just powerful and angry. And when he gives his messages to the members of the church, he throws out his words as if they literally directly came from God, and that he has the authority to tell you that you are doing these things wrong, and he's going to set you straight. That's his persona. So let me play this for you.
No one is talking about how problematic the YSA devotional with Elder Bednar was last night at the Tempe YSA stake, so I'm going to talk about it. For context, Elder Bednar is a high-ranking official in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He is in the quorum of the 12 apostles, and that basically means he is like endowed with these special priesthood keys that no one else on earth has. I'm going to tell you some fun things that happened last night that were a little strange. So in talking about dating, they were trying to bring this idea home that, you know, looks aren't the most important thing. Like, you should find someone that you genuinely, like, get along with, and get it over with. Okay, so he brought up this example. He was like, do you remember growing up and seeing the ward choir perform in sacrament meeting on church on Sunday? They weren't the most physically attractive or fit people, were they? Everyone was like, what did he just say? Like, everyone was like, oh, what? To rectify it, he said, that's gonna be you in 10 years, so you might as well get it over with. Okay, number 2. So he was talking about these keys, right?
Okay, that's concerning right there. He's telling this group of young single adults, that's what YSA stands for. He's telling this group of young single adults, look, finding somebody that's attractive should not be your big thing. Just get over it, because you're going to be fat and old someday, just like those old people in the choir are that stand in front of you every Sunday morning and sing to you. So if you think you're hot now, just get over it, babe, because you're not going to be hot in 30 years. So you need to marry somebody for other things besides how they look. Okay, so that's what she's talking about.
He was talking about how he is endowed with these keys, these priesthood keys that no one else has, and he was talking about how like wherever he goes, it's not a coincidence, right? Like, wherever the keys go, it's not a coincidence. So he was talking about, like, I invoke, like, we're gonna sing this closing hymn, and you're gonna hear it in a way that, like, you've never heard before. I invoke the keys, all this magical whatever. Okay, so we sing the song. It's Let Us All Press On. We get through the first verse, and he walks up to the podium, and he, like, grabs the mic and stops everyone. He's like, you all look miserable. Basically, you should smile more comment.
I love that, because all of you women out there, you've probably had the experience of having someone tell you, you'd be a lot prettier if you just smile, mostly coming from older men. So that was funny that she would throw that in. But what she goes on to say is that he interrupts the song, stands up, grabs a microphone, goes up to the microphone and says, you people, you're not singing this with the right spirit.
Like, okay. So people responded by, okay, let's bring the energy. Let's stand up. Big fucking mistake. Okay, so usually in the church, how this goes is when a high-ranking official of the church walks in the room as a sign of...
Okay. Anyway, what he's saying is, so then they're like, okay, well, then we'll just stand up and we'll really sing it. And this song, I wish I had a good voice. I have a horrible voice, but it's a very military, let us all press on in the work of the Lord, that, so it's very military and it's like one of those, type of songs. And so that's what they're singing. And he interrupts them and goes up to the front and goes, you're not singing it. So the guys are like, okay. So they decide they're going to stand up and sing. And then he's like, comes back to the microphone. He goes, you can't stand up. I'm not standing up. And if I'm not standing up, you can't stand up. Do you not know how this works? I am the power figure here. I am the royal presence here. This is the second time he's done this. This is not the first time he's done this tyrant. It's almost as if he knows that that's the reaction he's going to get. That's an apostle of God speaking. So anyway, people, happy 2024. This is why I have had such a hard time letting go of talking about Mormonism. But I swear to you, 2025, ladies, we're going to talk about your health. We're going to talk about your happiness and your freedom. And I really encourage you to get on social media and start looking up other women that are over the age of 50 and what they're doing and how they're finding joy. And I want you to practice saying something that you may not have ever said in your life. I want you to forget all the affirmations that you've written on little Post-it notes and stuck on your mirror. I want you to say one thing every day to yourself when you wake up in the morning. And I want you to practice. And this word is no. No. It's a hard word for women to say, but it involves so many areas of our lives. No, I don't want to babysit. No, I don't want to give up my beautiful home to go in an RV and go duck hunting with you for the rest of our lives. No, I don't want to play golf. No, I don't want to learn how to make a quilt or a fabulous macaroni and cheese recipe. I don't even like macaroni and cheese. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't have to do this anymore. I have raised children my whole life. I have raised grandchildren. I have supported you in your job and your schooling and everything else. And it's my turn. It's my turn. And that's what I want to hear you say. And that's what we're going to be focusing on in 2024. So thank you for joining me today. It's just been a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to She Became Visible 513 on YouTube and She Became Visible podcast in 2025. Please join me. Thanks for listening to this today. We'll talk to you. Oh, I will be doing a show on Christmas Eve with RFM and be talking about some things that are kind of true to my heart. So thanks for joining me today. Bye-bye.